Okay, all ready? Thank you all for coming. So many people. So, how's the conference been so far? Great, I imagine. Perfect. So, we're going to talk about a little bit about infrastructure as code and our favorite tool that we actually built. Well, to do that, so this is Ryan and I'm Jan. I'm going to get to that later a bit. First of all, thanks a lot to our sponsors, which enable us all to be here, of course. And then this is us. So this is Ryan, I'm Jan. We're both Azure Cloud engineers. We both do a lot of automation and PowerShell stuff. We both work at Workspace in Switzerland. So in other words, we're kind of the same, but different, but still same. So you guys already on board with infrastructure as code? Great. So still a quick walkthrough where we even do that. So our use case is mostly about Azure, so we don't want to be clicking around in the portal, and we don't really like the CLI either. So infrastructure as code is our tool of choice to write our infrastructure in declarative way, and don't repeat ourselves, and put mostly all of it in CI/CD, so we don't even need to assign real permissions to people. So that's a few of the
plus points.
Plus points, thanks.
Yep.
So then, where are we now? Maybe you're still a newbie with no experience in infrastructure as code. I hate animations. You're not yet scarred by failure with ARM or Bicep and stuff like that.
Screen of red builds because they don't run properly, yeah.
And it didn't change the color of the error message to green.
Yeah.
This is the perfect time to start, because you need to start somewhere, and it's definitely way better than clicking around the portal. Or maybe you're a seasoned vet already, and you've seen many, many builds fail, which is, of course, a thing that happens to all of us. Probably you know your favorite tool, you're opinionated about it, and you probably want to stick to it if we come and say, hey, we know it better. But that's the perfect time to switch. We're trying to convince you today about other tools. And for that, we're going to talk about our first challenger, which would be ARM, so Microsoft's native tool. ARM is me. So, I'm the ARM guy now. Pretty much the main point about ARM is that it's Microsoft native, so that's the plus point that everybody talks about, right? We have a little comparison prepared for simple resources, so we just deploy a simple storage account with a static website enabled and some web pages that we upload via blobs. And this is what it looks like in ARM. So it's JSON, JSON. We have some parameters here, and we have some variables here, and the resource, we create a resource group, and then the deployment to deploy the storage account and stuff. And that all works fine. You need to call it by PowerShell or CLI or whatever. And then...
But you realize you're actually completely wrong, because Bicep is obviously infinitely better than ARM in the sense that it's also Microsoft, also cloud native directly to the APIs, all the benefits you've got of that. You can see the code is a lot simpler. I mean, I have to split it into two separate files because of scope. So this first one here is got the subscription where I deploy the resource group. And then I've got a second file where I deploy the stuff in the resource group. So here we've got the params. It's a little bit easier to understand, not so verbose as JSON. Yeah, so it's the same thing. We're doing exactly the same thing. We've got our storage account. We've got our files that we have to upload. But Bicep can't do anything on the data level. You can only do management. So I've had to do some funky stuff to get this to working. But Bicep is still amazing. I created a managed identity, and now I've enabled the storage account, the static website feature, and I've uploaded all the files. I even got a for each loop in there. Look how amazing my for each loop is. I've got here for file info. And yeah, here's my objects, and then I loop through and I create it. Super easy, everyone can read this.
Yeah, but then Terraform comes along. And actually, so that was still kind of a mess, right? So a lot of stuff, and it's native Microsoft, yeah, plus point, but it's native Microsoft, so it's only Azure. And in the end, it still just generates ARM, and really this use case doesn't even work with ARM. Sorry. And then we get Terraform along, which for the same stuff It's just way more concise. It's not JSON, it's multi-platform. We can go to AWS if we really want to. We don't need to mess with scopes. We just can deploy to subscriptions, to resource groups, to whatever we want, even to Azure AD if we want. And the same stuff that we just had in the ARM file with, let's see, 244 lines. And then in Bicep with, I don't know, 26 and about 170. In Terraform only takes 98, and there's also an example block that we don't need to count these 10 lines, so 89, then 88.
Yeah, I've realized there's a slight technical problem here because I'm wearing a microphone, but you are obviously wrong, and this is the reason why we're here, and that's because Pulumi is obviously the best tool that there is for deploying infrastructure as code. It has all the benefits of Terraform in the sense that we have all of the providers. We can talk to AWS, we can talk to GCP, we can talk to Azure AD, we can go anywhere we like. We can, however, write in our own language. So if you know how to write PowerShell, which everyone here can do, you can write Pulumi. You don't need to learn how to do HCL, you don't need to learn how to write JSON, you don't need to learn Bicep. If some of you guys here are C# developers, you can write in C#, you can write in F#, you can write in JavaScript, in Go, in Python, whatever you want to do, you can write it and Pulumi will take it and deploy it for you. So we're going to show you exactly what we've done here, and basically what we've done is we've created the PowerShell implementation of Pulumi for you guys so that you can start today if you haven't used infrastructure as code before, or you can switch, and Jan's going to show you some of the massive features that we got.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we had the 88 lines in Terraform, right? And this is PowerShell, which is readable, of course. And it's only 62 lines, actually. And this works. And Terraform works, too. Cool. So what we built here is we actually wanted to build it the normal way for a language provider for Pulumi. But then, before we could finish that, Pulumi YAML came out, which, of course, made it much easier. So Pulumi YAML is a new provider from them that enables us to write YAML code for Pulumi, which first step sounds like a step back, right? But hear me out. So we can use anything to generate that YAML, and Pulumi actually thought of that. So we just create this Pulumi YAML file to tell Pulumi that it needs to use some other stuff to get to its YAML. And here we just tell it, hey, use PowerShell, execute this file, and then there you go. And for that, to build all of this stuff that he's about to show afterwards, we use their gigantic schema JSON file that contains all the resources, all the functions, and all of the Pulumi Azure stuff with 620,000 lines. So that generated a lot of modules, of course, because we modularized, right?
That's actually a very small file in comparison to our module.
Yeah. So there's now 150 modules from us in the gallery for all the different use cases. And I want to take over into a really quick sample. So we just create one of our Pulumi YAML file blocks. Yeah. And
so while you're doing that, I was maybe just to say that we built this based on the DSL. So we come from like DSC place, so we tried to build it in a way that's sort of familiar to the way you guys work. So some stuff we're sort of obscuring from your view. It's sort of as well pested in that sense. So there are parameters there. That's like a script block, but yeah, just so it's sort of clear to you that that's what we're doing. Yeah,
it's basically this is just the basics, and then in here you can work normally. So let's say we want to create a new resource group. So we go new-as native resource. Oh, we get IntelliSense. Fine, cool. And then what do I need to add here? So resource group name, of course. So let's call this PSConf rocks. And one tiny quirk that we need to figure out first, or somewhere in the future, is that we need to pass a Pulumi ID, because Pulumi needs some sort of representation for the object in its state afterwards. And we can call it whatever we want. We'll just call it PSConf as well.
Right, if you're familiar with Terraform, it's the same. So when you define a Terraform resource, then you define the name. It's exactly the same.
And not to do that properly, because, well, right now I have the model imported on my machine, of course, but maybe someone else doesn't. So we go, what's it?
PS Pulumi YAML.Azure native.
And there we go.
Oh,
so we import the module that's just responsible for resource handling, so for the resource group, for example. And that's it. That now works. We're going to go off to well, more advanced demos.
Yep. So we're going to jump to a much more complicated example because we didn't want to start typing our code live and have it all go wrong. So we just wanted to show you, actually it wasn't this one. We just wanted to show this one up here, right? Didn't we have 3?
I can go back to this one.
All right, sorry. Okay, so we've got this file here, which is already a little bit more advanced. So you can see we're using 2 of the modules. One is the resources, one is the storage. We split them out like this so that they're much easier for you to download. It's basically the same way as AZ modules are split out. So you can install just the PS Pulumi YAML to Azure native, and it will install all of the other modules, all the 186 other ones. You can just import the individual ones, and it's obviously a bit faster and saves you some space. So I'm going to take you through this very basic example of creating a storage account with a static website on it, and hopefully this should be really easy for you to understand because you will understand PowerShell. So what we've done here is we've created an array for our locations that we want to deploy to, and here I've created a resource group, and I can just straight up say, okay, I want to deploy to resource location 1, so I can just say $location0. Pretty obvious, and I'm going to save it in a variable, and then we support a couple of different ways of using the function. So these are the very PowerShell-y ways of doing it. And I did actually have a discussion with Thomas Maurer just before this, and we debated about this as well, about the use of the verbiage. Like new, if it's declarative, doesn't really make sense, but there are aliases which you can use as well, which are slightly different. But here, I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to create a new Azure storage account, and I'm just going to splat it on here. So it looks a bit easier for me in the ID here. So I've got my ID, I can create the account name, and here you can see we've got something a bit special. So maybe in the future we can do a deep dive, because I have a feeling we could talk about this for ages. But yeah, basically here I'm creating a reference. So I've $resource-script.reference, and you can do this on any resource you create within Pulumi, and you can say I want to reference the name. And what that does is that creates an implicit dependency on the resource. So that the resource script has to be deployed in order for this one to be deployed. Explicit, sorry. And then obviously it inherently as well passes the name to that property as well. So then going through, you can see we've got just a hash table here we've defined for the SKU. This is just for, it looks a bit nice on my screen, and I'm a horrible PowerShell person because when we were talking, when we was hearing Rob in his session talking about aliases, I put aliases everywhere in my code. I'm sort of the worst person for that. So yeah, so this looks a bit easier, but we actually have a different way of doing this. There are functions for everything. So you can just say, here I could say new dash, German keyboard, Azure native storage, this happens to us a couple of times where the PowerShell extension doesn't want to read our thing. But yeah, there's a function there which I can pass just name, and you would see the entire list of as a validate set, so you don't even have to know what standard LRS is. You can just pick it straight out of the list. But yeah, I don't want to restart our VS Code and it break the demo, so just trust me, it's there. Yeah, so then we come down here and we use the create the static website, and here we've got another couple of references, the same as what we had before. And then it comes to the interesting stuff. So this is something that would be so difficult, and I know when I first learned Terraform, and Jan mentioned as well, this is one of the things he hates about Terraform, and it's the same in ARM, the same in Bicep. If you want to do anything like complex with for each or objects or anything, very difficult syntax to understand. And for people in PowerShell, we are used to just being able to just create an array and just pipe it and do things. So that's exactly what we've done here. We've just created an array with some hash tables in it, and we for eached it, and we're able to create blobs. So, and here you can see we've created a file asset, which is just a way of loading something from the local disk. But we can do that from HTML, from like a storage account with a URI or whatever we want. So yeah, so I think this alone as just a feature is something that makes, I think, a lot of PowerShell people feel a lot more comfortable when if they were going to be developing infrastructure as code. So there's something small that we would like to improve, and we have like a beta of it, but it's not, there's no real nice way of us implementing it without us writing tons of code manually, which we don't want to do. But here there are the functions. So every Azure resource that you use has a ton of functions which you can call on it, and this one, for example, is the list storage account keys. What we would like to be able to do is that you could say $storageaccount.list account keys, and then you could just call it straight from there. As I say, we have a beta of it, but it's not working the way that we want it right now. So right now you can just call the function, and you can see I just passed in the reference to the storage account and the resource group, and I've got the keys, and I can define my outputs, and here it is. So I think for most people in this room, I would like to think that everyone can understand this and could just pick this up and write their own Azure infrastructure. So yeah, I think that's one of the big things that we've done. And before I then jump, let me just say, so one thing is when we was listening to Tobias's session on the first day, he talked a lot about modularization. So you look at this and you go, okay, well, there's actually a lot of code here, and maybe in my company I'd like to standardize a lot of this, like the name of the account, or perhaps every time someone wants a storage account, I want to have it in a separate resource group with a standard set of rules applied to it. So it would be really cool if I could create a function and package this all up. And that's actually exactly what you can do. So, so here is the function we created. So following in the vein of Rob, so we got super long name. So deploy storage account as approved by company infrastructure security. Yeah, so you can just pass in the project name, and we basically say, okay, we're going to deploy it to every location that we approve. So we do a for each loop over the approved locations, and we create ourselves a resource group, and we have a standardized name. We create a storage account with a standardized name, and we return it. So now, if you look at my more complex, or I guess less complex version of the code now, I can just create my Pulumi YAML block, and I can say, okay, I want to deploy a storage account as approved by company infrastructure security, and pass it the project name, and then I've got a ton of storage accounts. So now I can loop over those storage accounts I've created and say, okay, now I want to enable the static website on there, and I want to upload the files the same as I did before. But now that's packed into a function. So I can put this in a module and send that out to my whole team, and we have standardized deployments for this. So yeah, so I think that's in a nutshell the tool. It's very basic level. I don't know if you want to take over and talk about some of the other cool features that we want to implement.
No, but
from here.
No, wait a second. I want to show this one. So,
oh, sorry.
The part that talked about the for each loop or any loop whatsoever. I hate the looping in Terraform with a passion. So, to do this simple stuff that we just did in PowerShell with pipe for each, we need to do this weird syntax with for each, and then first pass this on into a map and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and do this, or the other way. We have two options for this. We can do it with a simple count, which, in my opinion, is closer to for each. It's probably close to a for loop, but it still sucks. I mean, you say count, and then you go, give me count.index. How is that intuitive? Yeah. Where are we going to go?
Yeah, that's not.
Pester. Yeah, so we have written, or actually he has written some pester tests. So this is some simple storage account deployment again. And then we have a couple of tests written for it. First about our naming, right?
Yeah, I guess it's important to say, like, where if you look at some of the other tooling that we've got in there, like Terraform has Sentinel.
Yep.
So you can use that to verify your code before it gets deployed out. It's a very expensive tool that you have to have running separately in the cloud. It can't run on premise, and that can validate things like, I don't want to deploy compute in this subscription, or I have to follow this naming convention. And the guy who just had a pretty good session next door, he created this thing called Pester, and we can use that tool to basically do the same thing. So we can, because it's all PowerShell, so we can see we're running through here, and as you just mentioned, we've got some basic tests in there. So the first section we've just defined here does some very basic stuff. So yeah, just basically make sure that it doesn't generate an error. So we just say, okay, we run the script, and it should not throw an error, and it should be not null. So pretty basic stuff. And then these are all in the example report we'll talk about at the end. But we want to simplify this for you guys as well, so we want to give like a helper module which sort of simplifies some of the syntax here. But yeah, the main point, I don't want to go through too much of this, but the point is really that you can test all of your infrastructure before you even push it. So I can do things like say, I don't want to have any Azure compute resources. I want to make sure the names of my storage accounts are like this. Or I want to check for styling, and I want to make sure that certain things are being used in certain ways. So yes, I think we talked a lot. We said a lot of things. Maybe you can actually demo how it actually works.
We didn't run it. So this is our folder, right? The demo folder that we just showed here. So let's prove that. Is that a bit too small, right? So we have our Pulumi YAML in here, which contains just that little piece of code that tells it to run PowerShell and run our complete file here. or at least I hope it does. It does. So it just says, call PowerShell, run this file, which generates the configuration, and then do whatever YAML tells you to do. So, just
to be clear, you could also just change that to PowerShell and run it on Windows if you wanted to, but he's on a Mac, so that's why we run it with PowerShell 7.
Yeah, sure.
We support both.
Yeah. So we run Pulumi preview, which is going to tell us what we want to do. All right, the stack.
Yeah, I think we're not going to make this too much about a Pulumi session. We can talk a lot about Pulumi if you want in it, like outside or whatever, but there is this concept of stacks, similar to workspaces in Terraform, if you know about workspaces in Terraform.
Yeah, there we go. So it ran our PowerShell and saw that we want to create storage accounts for 2 locations and add static websites into there in a couple of blobs with a couple of files. And now you actually want to deploy it.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So I think the website for Pulumi is pretty awesome for you guys as well.
And I need to choose a stack, which I always forget.
So one thing as well, this is when I built the demos for this, I ran ARM, took forever to run. Bicep was relatively much the same, but I felt like for whatever reason that was a tiny bit quicker. Terraform is quite good because it has a lot of simultaneous calls that it can make, but Pulumi was by far the fastest to execute. And that's actually because Pulumi directly integrates with the APIs for Azure. So Terraform, one of the biggest problems that with the Azure APIs in any way is that it goes through the Azure SDK. So you're often having to wait for updates to come through when features get delivered to Azure. Pulumi has a native integration direct to the API. So as soon as a feature is released, it's here available. Well, what have we done?
I don't know.
Oh, because your storage account has a dash in it. That's not allowed.
Didn't we catch that? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, right.
That's foreshadowing for the end of this session. Foreshadowing.
Yeah. See, perfect. So we get rid of this and do it again. And now, of course, because it's declarative and not imperative, it just looks at what do we already have, plans, tells us where do you want to go, and we tell it, yeah, actually do that. And then off we go. So I want to delete. Apparently, you tried to deploy one of those storage accounts. It doesn't work.
I think it screwed its state up because you cancelled it just by Control-C. So that's one thing for people who are used to ARM. There is a state that like there is in Terraform. So you have to put that state somewhere. So Pulumi by default will put it in the Pulumi cloud, which is free for any non-organization. But you can put it on a storage account. You can have it locally. Put it on a file share, whatever you want to do. It's freaking out because you have deployed that resource.
Probably because that storage account name is a bit too generic.
Oh, yeah, that could actually be, yeah.
Probably someone already has that one.
Yes. I mean, maybe.
Actually, why is that not in here anymore? You changed my code?
Yeah. If it makes you feel better, I can say yes.
Cool.
Okay, yes, I did. You're 100% gone over the 23 character limiter now.
Probably. Probably.
It's always the storage account, whoever said that, yeah.
What's the name now? Still there.
No. That's the ID. That's the ID. That's the ID. That's the ID.
I think it's going to be the same. Yeah, it's probably going to be the same.
Yeah. We didn't pray before we come in here to the demo gods, did we? No sacrifices, no.
Exactly.
No. I'm vegan, so I can't sacrifice. It's terrible.
And you had to get there in there, right?
Yeah.
So where are we doing this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can just trust us. I mean, what you can do is go to just look. You can use the URL. And we can just go and check it out. And you can show the UI. Just the point is, we just wanted to show what it looks like when you deploy it. If you're better than us, then it works.
Yep. Yeah. So that would be the list.
Yeah, so just show, you can show the stack, and you can show the resource that was already deployed. So you can see here, so like, if you scroll back to the top, so you can see like this, the PS Pulumi YAML, or YAML Pulumi, it was just the folder that he created, I think. So then the dev is the workspace, and you can see the entire stack that he's deployed, and you can see what resources were added and which commit it was bound to and stuff. And if you go to activity, that basically is the same as what we saw on the console, so you can look at that straight here as well. So we can see that it failed because, where is it? Show us the output. Basically tells you that it failed for that reason. And they have a graph. So if you click on that resource page there at the top, gives you like a graph view of all the resources that are currently active in the in Azure.
So all the properties.
Yeah. So if we had sacrificed, it would have worked well. But yeah. So that's
we can fix it live, right?
We could fix it live. I think fixing it live, you're gonna.
We hope that no one has the PSConfEU Switzerland North. Okay. Oh no, is it Switzerland North? That's way too long, anyways.
Yeah, I think they get it. I think it's cool. You can try running in the background.
Yeah. What else do you have?
All right. So some other cool things that we some like added like bonuses that we're like working on. It's not like part of this core project. So basically this thing is a project like that's in GitHub. You can check it out. We have it on our workspace organization. But there are some other things that sort of tie into this, which make it a lot nicer. Which some of them are built already, and some of them are like in progress. So one of them is PSCaf naming. So we talked about how he created a storage account which had a dash in it. Not everyone knows that you can't have dashes in storage accounts, and not everyone knows that they can only be 23 characters long. And there are lots of resources which have lots of strange rules about what chars and how long. So we have, is it still dying?
Yeah, because Switzerland North is still too long.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So so PSCaf naming basically is a module which you can use to create names. So you can specify prefixes, you can specify suffixes, and there's switches on there which will say clean input, and it will strip out all of the chars which are not allowed for that resource. So if you say I want to create a storage account, and it will remove all the dashes for you, and the naming conventions which you can define will automatically pick out the abbreviations for all the resources. So if you want to know that the abbreviation for storage account is ST, you can just grab that, and you don't need to know it, it will just put it in the resource for you. Or API management is APIM. So that's a resource also that we wrote, and it basically simplifies our config here.
Will that help with the length too?
That will help with the length as well. So
it'll fix everything.
It fixes everything. Yeah, so basically it has a priority of which parts are more, have a higher precedence. So then your project name, for example, might have the highest precedence, but your prefix for dev might be irrelevant. So then it will say, okay, if it's too long, we'll strip off the last few characters of that piece of the name.
And that priority is something you can define, like?
Yeah, you can set it, you can pass it through and say which is the highest priority, yeah. And you can use it also even if you just want to, if you have your own naming convention and it's completely separate and you just want to say, is this valid? You can just pass the name in and say check validation, and it will say, actually, no, this is complete garbage, and it has a regex check built in, and it knows for every resource what the validation is.
I'm new to class code.
Sure.
You're making use case here to use Pulumi.
Yes, that's exactly it, yeah.
So because the company where I work, they use Terraform.
Yep.
So you're making also use case to move to Pulumi?
Yeah. So we have a lot of customers that use Terraform, and this right now is arguably in beta. I mean, this is just our company that's created this tool, but we're working with Microsoft. Yeah, this is an open source project that we created.
We didn't create.
Oh, sorry, Pulumi. Sorry.
PowerShell provider.
Sorry, that's cleared. Sorry, Pulumi created Pulumi.
Write Terraform day in, day out, and we have those pain points with the looping every day, and other points. For example, with the policy, oftentimes. So oftentimes you have customers that have a policy that, for example, disables public network access for storage accounts. And with Terraform, it first deploys it with a public endpoint and then removes it. And so policy already catches that and tells you, no, you can't do that.
So you have experience with all of them, and you say,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with Pulumi, because we talk directly to the API, we don't fall into those pits with the policies.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that was stopping up like us and a lot of companies from picking up Pulumi was the fact that Pulumi it's a bit underground, it's not very popular right now, but also because it's more for developers. So you can, as I say, you can write in Go or Python or C#, and most system infrastructure people who are going to do this are using PowerShell or maybe Python, but I think a lot of us that are here in the Azure team are using PowerShell, and that just didn't exist. So we saw that need and we created the PowerShell piece, which we hope is going to allow a lot more companies to adopt Pulumi rather than Terraform, or even make the switch.
And are major companies that you know of already are adapting Pulumi?
Well, yeah, as I say, I mean, Pulumi, I don't know anyone that's using, like large companies that are using Pulumi. I know a lot of developers that are developing for companies that use Pulumi in C# or TypeScript. and we've spoken to a couple of our customers about making the switch, and it's just a case of we need to demonstrate to them that this is robust tooling. So as I say, we've only just now created the PowerShell implementation, so I think a lot of big companies are going to be a bit skeptical of it. And we are working with Microsoft. There's a lady called April Edwards, who's a big lady out in the US. She's from the US, but she lives in the UK. She's going to be here, I think, today or tomorrow. And she thinks it's quite a cool tool, and she says she's going to help us blog about it, and we've been chatting to some other people in the background as well, so we're hoping that Microsoft will help us push the tool because it's PowerShell. But I think we need the community, we need you guys. If you guys think this is a good thing, then we'll keep pushing it. We are invested in making it happen. But inevitably, it's about what you guys want. So if you think this is a cool tool, then people will make it happen.
How you can make sure that Pulumi is like Terraform, it's known, and it will be developed? How can you make sure that future-wise it's robust,
Yeah, so I think that's something that Pulumi is doing themselves. So Pulumi are like HashiCorp. They are doing their own conferences. They push Pulumi quite hard, and Microsoft works with them, and AWS works with them. So there's a lot of push behind Terraform as well, behind Pulumi as well. But they're just a little bit younger than Terraform, I would say. And HashiCorp have the big market share. Yeah. Sorry.
Does Pulumi plus PowerShell work with AWS?
We haven't generated the module yet.
We need to check if the schema file exists in the same way as it does for Azure.
So I checked, it is the same.
Oh.
But what we do have is, if we decide to be lazy and not do that, there is, we create as part of the core module, there's a thing called generic resource. So you can create any resource from any of the providers. You just don't get the IntelliSense that we provide you with PowerShell, but you can straight up just create any resource that way, yeah. Any more questions? Okay. Otherwise, here are the links that we created. We can definitely go into more deep diving stuff. We didn't want to take it too deep, but if you guys have any questions about how we implemented it, or how anything works, then please come and ask us. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.